Okay, then I guess it's time to get going. And for our top news this week, apparently uh, China's electric vehicle market has recovered with a surprise star that outsells Tesla. What's that about?
Oh, let's wait. That's just the time. Okay, we'll play it this way. Okay, because often you give the list of the things, but
Oh, okay. Let me do them all for a minute. I forgot about that.
okay, the teaser.
Yeah, the coronavirus. Why it's a big deal if the first vaccine could be genetic. Interesting. Now, technology. I don't know what quantum entirely means, but apparently higher education can take to prepare for a new quantum workforce. Now, in materials, we're exploring very small things, the unusual properties of quantum-sized materials. And in space, what can you use it for? Now, how about mining rare earth elements from asteroids using bacteria? I don't know what that is. Then, in environment, apparently Japan's Toshiba has retreated from using coal-fired power stations. In biology, scientists are now using bacteria as micro 3D printers. And for us as humans, apparently our big game hunters way back when were female. Ha! And then in health, people who eat chili pepper may live longer. So that's what we're talking about. And so, Richard, on the top story, what's this about China's electro vehicle market recovering with a star that outsells Tesla?
Well, it's an interesting story, but first I want to do something that I have never done at one of these shows, and that is to introduce a word. I learned a new word this week that I thought would be appropriate for us in this group. And this word is opsimath. And this is a person who continues to study or learn late in their life. And I think anybody who is here listening and watching us is an opsimath.
I
And
agree.
I thought that it would be good to know that there is a word that describes who you are. An example of a couple of opsimaths from the art world. On one hand, there's Grandma Moses of 100 years ago, I guess, who in her 70s suddenly became a painter and became famous with her primitive style. And then there was also Michelangelo, who worked when he was young, but he did his best work when he was an old guy. And so opsimaths include people who have studied their whole life and people who put it aside for a while and came back to it in these years.
Oh, yeah, that's understandable.
So, anyway, I just wanted to give you that new word, and it's a word that you can use to describe yourself, I think. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about cars. And the electric vehicle market
And hold on,
has
actually,
a
a
real
Zoom meeting with
change that is
hot
happening.
science. It just started.
Let me just wait for the Phyllis. Okay, Phyllis. And
Okay, great, thanks. Hi.
this, the in China, uh, the EV sales dropped by 50% in January in the beginning of the COVID in China, and now they have recovered. The car that is selling the best and is made in China is, of course, the Tesla Model uh, S, and now more than 50,000 of those have been sold. But by the end of the year, there's going to be a new model in China that is outselling the Teslas. And this is from a company that none of us have heard of, the Wuling Hongguang Mini EV. And uh, it's selling from the time it was introduced in the middle of the year, 7,000 a month of these new cars. It'll seat four. It'll only do 60 miles an hour and has a range of about 150K, but it costs about $5,000, about a tenth of the price of a Tesla. So you can see why it's outselling them. And I got some pictures here for you.
Oh, good.
This is a
Oh.
cutaway drawing where you can see its door and the back seat. I guess there are no rear doors, so you have to fold the seats to get in the back. And there's almost no hood area in the front because the electric motor and the battery is pretty tiny in this thing. And it's about the size of a smart car. Look at this thing. This
I like it.
this cute little thing. I like it
Yeah.
too. I want one. Here's a
Yeah,
lady
yeah, yeah.
putting stuff in the back. And I haven't gone through all the specs, but what I saw said it had actually fairly advanced features like anti-skid brakes and things like this that you think about as quality features. And with those kind of things, I bet it's easy to bring it into other countries and import it because it's going to certainly meet their pollution rules. And if it meets with good brake systems, meets their safety rules, then you can import it. Now, though it's got a very Chinese name, 45% of this company is owned by General Motors.
Oh,
And so, uh, again, since I'm kind of a technology guy and a marketing guy, I'm used to the idea of how do you deal with a changing market in a changing technical environment. And one way to deal with it is to develop the skills yourself. This takes a long time. Another way to deal with it is make a partnership with somebody who knows how to do it. And the thing about these EVs is they're new enough. Nobody knows how to do it. It's easy to get started, and they have this Chinese company that is going blockbusters, and will next year they will be the biggest seller all year long. And I can't wait till we can get one in a HEIC. Now, I thought EVs were out of my range, but $5,000, it'll be $6,000 by the time we have tariffs, maybe $7,000. But even I can afford that. Gee.
You have to
Where's the-
make sure it's designed. You have to make sure it's designed for cobblestone streets.
yes.
Yes, yes.
Richard, where is it being sold right now?
China
Only, right?
only, yes.
But they hope in the next year or so to.
There are no dates that I saw anywhere. What I know they have to do before they can import it into other countries, every country has different automotive safety rules. And so they just have to figure out how to do that. There was a small car in India, the Nano, that was developed for the Indian market, and they couldn't export that because it wouldn't meet US safety rules. But
Richard, what is the range with when you charge up the battery? How many miles or
100
kilometers?
miles, 100 miles.
Okay. I just want to point out, I own a Nissan Leaf, which is, I bought used 1916 for about $12,000.
Uh-huh.
So you might want to think about that. That's available right now. And it's a wonderful car.
Uh-huh. I'm sure it is. Now, I had,
Anything else?
for me, I had fantasy dreams almost of a car like this a few months ago, and I was thinking about what Tesla was doing and their body approaches, where the body is made out of rolled metal instead of formed like these other bodies. And I was envisioning some tiny car like this that would sell for only a few $1,000s. And then here comes one in the news.
Okay, then moving along, in coronavirus, why is it such a big deal if the first vaccine is genetic?
Well, let me show our slideshow. Okay. Because the genetic approach that they are using has never successfully been used before. And one of the reasons why it's such a big deal is that this vaccine was based on the genetic code of the virus. China, late in January, China released the genetic code for the COVID virus to the scientific community around the world. That's January. By the end of February, they are so good now at making DNA and its variants that by the end of February, Pfizer and really their BioNTech company had already figured out 20 possible vaccine candidates and had, of those 20 candidates, put 4 of them into human testing. This one that has 90% effectiveness that was announced a few days ago was one of those 4. And before this, the fastest a vaccine has been developed for a new virus is 5 years.
Mm.
And so instead of 5, this is 1. So that's one of the reasons it's a big deal. It's a lot faster. The other part of it that is interesting is about 10 years ago, in the history of vaccines, they started with trying different things and throwing them up against the wall, and the one that seemed to work they would test more and then refine it and stuff. About 10 years ago, they started a new approach where they were starting to analyze the genetic structure of these viruses and figure out what portion of it is attaches to the humans and elements like this. And so they got to be very much smarter in the way in which they were attacking the virus. And this vaccine is exactly the result of that kind of thinking. This vaccine and the Moderna vaccine both do something to make your body create little COVID spikes. And when your body creates these COVID spikes, the immune system thinks they're all enemies and develops antibodies to kill them. And so then if you get the virus, you're already ready. The little spikes can't damage you. You don't have the infection. They cause no damage. But anyway, it's a whole new way to approach it. And before this, the big companies still were not very interested in this new technology. It was expensive to get started with, and they had their ways of doing it already. And there had been about a dozen mRNA vaccines that had made it to human testing, and none of them got through the human testing. So this would be the first successful one. And again, doing it in 1 year instead of 5 years is amazing. Also, by the way, if these don't work out, there are another 60 vaccines that are in various stages of human testing now, and some of them are things that use the old technique. This virus is going to be, vaccine is going to be hard to distribute because it requires a super cold freezer that's about a minus 100 degree F, and those things don't exist around in medical labs and facilities. And so it's going to be hard to get the virus to the market, and it's going to
That's only
require.
Pfizer. That's only Pfizer's product. The newer one that came out
Right,
stays well for about 10 hours.
right.
Has room to-
The Moderna one then is able to operate with the coolers that people already have. Both of these vaccines take 2 vaccinations to become effective.
Did you mention, by the way, that all of this was made possible by the Chinese? That
Yes, I did. I said the Chinese released
I'm sorry.
the vaccine's genetic structure in January, and using this new technique, the scientists were able to submit 4 candidates into human testing at the end of February.
Exactly.
They could not have done that without the Chinese freely releasing the information.
Yeah.
Richard, I believe that as we get more and more people vaccinated, that combined with, call it a partial herd immunity, will accelerate when we begin to, because people who now are having it, and there's a lot of them, they will either die or develop some sort of immunity. So we're going to accelerate the time when we begin to feel safe.
That's true.
Right. Well, for me, once I have the vaccine and take it, and have taken the 2 things, I will feel like it's safe to go out and be with people again. Whether they're immune or not, if I'm immune, I'm free.
Yay!
You need to have a little sign saying you are immune. They're going to be afraid of you.
That's right. You can get a little tattoo. You know, one other thing about this mRNA vaccine is that you can manufacture it rapidly in large amounts, which you couldn't do with the traditional vaccines.
Yes.
That's a huge advantage.
Yes, absolutely.
Didn't Mexico already make a deal with Russia to buy 3 million doses or something a few months ago?
I think so. And
Although I'd rather not take that one.
Anyway, we'll see. I would like to take one that is well enough studied where they can say with some confidence of what the immunity rate is. The Russian vaccine has not been well enough studied to know that, or if it has, they very carefully have not released the information. And the only reason you don't release this information is that it doesn't make you look good.
Yeah, in fact, Richard, I read somewhere that they only did phase 1 and 2 testing for the Russian and Chinese
That's
vaccines.
what
They
I
didn't do
heard. That's what I heard. My joke about it is that they were going to use Mexico as the phase 3 test.
Okay, then, moving along. Now, what is this about what higher education should do to prepare us for a new quantum workplace?
I thought this would interest you, Fred, given your background in the educational system. It turns out as science develops new things and new technologies grow based on this, then what we have to do to prepare people in school changes. That should not surprise anyone. And so, what people did who were concerned about this, researchers talked to managers at more than 20 different quantum technology companies across the US and tried to ask the people who were going to be hiring technical people what they need for their education. And this is of concern to the companies now because many of these quantum things, like the communication devices, are presently in research and development, and they're turning them into products. And when the products are available, companies are going to want to use these products, and they're going to want to have people who know something about it. And so that's the thing that is creating the need. And it turns out the companies really want to seek employees that have traditional STM degrees, of course, but they want candidates to have a grasp of fundamentals, concepts in quantum information science and in technology. They want them to be quantum aware because they're going to be involved in production processes and research and development and marketing. And if they're quantum aware, then they're able to think about it to be able to be effective. And uh, again, they don't want, many of the people don't have to be experts, but they have to understand the fundamental concepts and hardware implementations and how the algorithms work and what a qubit is and things like that. And so they need to be able to speak the language of this technology that the company is talking about. And uh, they say it's a growing industry, this quantum business, that will produce new sensors, imaging equipment, communication equipment, computing technology, and more. So it's going to be a big deal. And they want uh, to be able to hire people who are going to be ready to start working.
Any thoughts? All right, moving along.
Okay, I don't mean to shut everybody down like this.
Well,
but
I agree, but I don't know what I can add to it. I mean, I agree they asked about it to, you know.
It's interesting to
They
me.
should education to just be more relevant in general.
It's interesting to me that they're talking to colleges about it, because in the area of high tech and semiconductors and stuff that I was involved with professionally for a lot of years, at the time that I was doing it, there were not effective college programs, and the training grounds were actually the companies that were doing the work. So if you wanted to become skilled at this, then you go get a job at some company that was doing it, and you would learn that way. And to see them actually taking the time to try to work with colleges and saying, what can you do to help us get ready, is different than it was when I started doing this stuff.
Well, when you were doing this stuff, I think much of it was considered to be high in the sky and not worthwhile worrying about at that particular point. But now, high tech is taking a very large part of our community, and it's very much there to stay.
Well, the technology, the problem that colleges had teaching the stuff about the technology is the technology was changing so fast that by the time the colleges organized their curricula to deal with it, it was obsolete. And they had the next generation was already there. So anyway, it was a funny time in terms of science and technology and working. And
So presumably, Richard, at some level, what higher education needs to do is examine your next item here about exploring the unusual properties of quantum-sized material.
yes, this is an example of the problem. Since the first time I heard the term nano was when I was working in a semiconductor company in the 1980s. And we were interested in nano because nano means really small. And we had the technology, really the only technology in the world at that time that knew how to make really small things. And so we're thinking, gee, there must be something we can do here. And, that just didn't pan out, or it panned out and it took another 30 years for it to do it. And so anyway, now it turns out that one of the hot areas in nano is the development of functional nanomaterials, and these are nanoparticles, tiny particles with diameters ranging from 5 to 500 nanometers. And a nanometer is a billionth of a meter. Is that right?
Oh,
So it's not very big. And I think a hair is like 1,000 nanometers, unless it's 1,000,000 nanometers, and I have my orders of magnitude mixed up. Anyway, and at that scale, where they have been working for a while, one of the things that they have discovered is wonderful new catalytic materials that are much more effective than anything that they've used before. And if you read carefully the many science stories about some new catalyst was developed that takes the carbon out of the atmosphere and makes something useful, all of those contain these nanocatalysts that are much more effective. And the idea is, once you get down to atomic size, having something that's shaped right for the atoms makes the processes work better. So it really is a fairly simple idea, but it's has real big effects. And then, so this means that the scientists are able to develop and produce materials and devices that have new characteristics that you'd only dream of before. And these are in electronics and in catalysis, like we talked about, and in optics, dealing with light. But the next range of this is let's make it small. Now that we have these 5 nanometers, let's shrink it to 1 nanometer or half a nanometer. So let's make it really small. And what can we do with this really tiny stuff? And so that's one of the areas where they're actually working on. And one of the things that they're looking at within this scale, these tiny nanoparticles they call SNPs, and SNP means sub nanoparticles. And one of the things they've been doing with these sub SNPs have been trying to combine different elements together and see what that does. So this is a time where science is just trying a bunch of stuff and seeing what it does. And one organization has figured out a way to look at multiple elements combining different metal salts with extreme control over the total number of atoms and the proportion of each element. So that's very fine control. And they were trying different combinations of iridium and tin oxides. And one of the things they discovered here is that with a specific iridium to tin ratio of 3 to 4, then the optical properties of this thing changed. It used to be when you made it make light, it would make white light, but at that particular range, then it makes yellow light.
Yay.
And so again, this is just there is a big universe of different elements and salts that they could try together and see what happens. And this is just kind of the first results of the first careful study of different ratios of tin and iridium oxide. And already it does stuff that nobody imagined it would do. And so this is part of the future of materials. And I would bet, as usual, the materials thing then is out of everybody's experience base. And so the comments we usually get are like this.
Well, nobody's taking you up on that yet, although I don't know if Phyllis was going to say something or not.
No, I just agreed with him. We have nothing to say. Well, we don't know nothing about it.
And the reason, by the way, that I keep giving these stories that it's hard to say much about is these are actually kind of the frontiers of technology, is what is happening in these development of new materials. And so I feel like even though none of us understand what I'm saying, that it's still good to go through it for us optimaths, people who want to keep learning.
I think they have been pursuing this kind of idea in medical research for some time. I know that my grandson got his PhD on that, developed, or rather, examining microcells of cancer.
Yep.
And he's doing that for a guy named Shaw. He's one of the Anderson's one of the billionaires that make life impossible in the U.S. Anyway,
Nanoparticles are one of the things that absolutely, there are a lot of medical experimentation going on presently, and there's some stuff that they have found already that is making its way into medical practice.
yeah.
So if we move along, and on talking about materials, what if we wanted some of the rare earth elements and we were able to get it from space, from asteroids, using bacteria? What's that about?
This is, I think, just amazing, actually. So one of the problems we have here on Earth is these rare earth elements, and they're used in electronics for many critical things, including they're used to make cell phones and computer screens and a bunch of other high-tech stuff. And some of these rare earth elements are presently in real short supply and are recognized around the world as the supply availability is at a critical level. And so they're trying to figure out what are some other ways that they can get these. It turns out, back to our friends, the bacteria, bacteria already do mining stuff on Earth. You see all these old rocks that become smooth and stuff with age. Part of that is just the action of bacteria on Earth. And so these scientists found 3 species of bacteria that will extract these rare earth elements from things like basalt on Earth. And because bacteria have different growth habits and different gravities, they did a recent test on the space station, and they put bacteria in with rocks and simulated 0G in space, a Mars gravity level, and they did the same experiment on Earth. So you had 3 different levels of gravity and microgravity, and they found out these bacteria do just as good at pulling the rare earth elements out of rocks in space and no gravity as they do on Earth. So what they did was they proved the concept that we can start mining asteroids using bacteria and get critical materials that we're running low of here on Earth. So that's what that's about.
Any thought?
One comment I would make on these rare earths: the Chinese have strategically bought up 95% of the world's rare earth mines around the world. So they have a stranglehold on the supply of rare earths.
Yes.
Even rare earth companies in the US are owned by the Chinese right now. So it's a strategic issue as well. It's not just a shortage.
Yes, I know. Well, it was strategic action on the part of the Chinese for decades.
Can you say that again? What did the Chinese buy up?
The mines that produce these rare earths that are needed for all these high-tech materials. They're very small in quantity, and they're scattered all over the world's surface, and they're to be mined. And the quantities are too small for it to be profitable. But the Chinese have invested and bought up all the mining sites around the world, in almost every country, wherever it's available.
Yes.
And you need that for electric cars, you need that for satellites, you need that for a lot of advanced technologies.
One of those, he was saying electric cars, one of the things you use these for is to make magnets, and the magnets that you make are the kind you put in the motors of the electric vehicles.
Wow.
So
That's
I hate to say it, but in some ways, the Chinese communists seem to be more efficient capitalists than the West.
I was just thinking that with the US in particular in turmoil, it's not making advances in technology the way the Chinese authoritarian government is.
Uh-huh.
I think in many ways we have lost 4 years as far as possibilities in science and development.
Yes.
okay then, moving along. What's this about Japan and Toshiba getting out of coal-fired power stations?
Now, this, we are in the middle of a massive transition in terms of the world's energy. And I liked this story because it's an example of the changes that are actually happening around the planet. In Japan, you know, Japan has used a lot of nuclear power, but they've had trouble with the nuclear power. If you recall some of the recent stories for the last decade or so. And still right now in Japan, because of this, coal power is really at a, they provide about a third of Japanese total electricity generation. So Japan is a place where they're sensitive about the need for clean power. And Toshiba, one of the biggest companies in the world that make coal mining equipment, now is saying they will not accept orders from anybody in the world for any additional coal plant equipment. They have 10 projects that they're finishing, but they're not going to take any new business, and they're going to take all of the R&D and marketing effort that they had on coal and put it to renewables. What a strange idea for a company to do. It turns out that this is actually the third such announcement in the last few months. The two other of the three big players, Germany's Siemens Energy and General Electric in the US, both have made announcements that they're getting out of the coal power plant business. And if you don't have any new coal power plants, then the coal business is going to go downhill. Yay.
Yay, yes.
Comments? Well, then move
I bet
to-
Donald doesn't like that.
Oh, well.
Does anybody know what Toshiba has in mind doing afterwards?
I don't know. I don't know.
Toshiba is big into gas, natural gas as well, because they make a lot of gas turbines. So I think a transition from coal to gas, because
But
gas
they're trying not to transition to gas. They're specifically want to transition into solar. They also make a lot of equipment for hydroelectric. So and they want to make a line of new advanced wind power devices. So they are moving heavily into renewable equipment and away from coal, and even the development efforts are moving them away from gas.
All right, thank you.
Okay, then moving on to biology. Now, what's this about using bacteria as small 3D printers?
Well, this is another story that I think is, very cool. And, I think a lot about 3D printers and that 3D printers uh, will revolutionize how we make things around the world. And we know they can make normal sized things, and they can even make multi-story houses using 3D printers. This is uh, making things that are so tiny that it's hard to even see them. And what they're doing is a kind of a trick. They lay down a pad of what's called super hydrophobic, strongly water repellent materials, and then expose that to bacteria that will make nanocellulose. And after a while, that super hydrophobic path is just covered with microcellulose, nanocellulose, they call it. And they can lay this down uh, again 1,000 times thinner than a human hair. It can be in any orientation. They can make layers of it. They can put different gradients of thickness and topology. And they can make tiny things and up to things that are like 20 centimeters, which are not so tiny. And this particular nanocellulose, why they are excited about it is this material is perfect for making support materials in the growth and regeneration of body tissue, like human muscles. So what they believe they will be able to make with this process is the thing that ends up where we can produce replacement organs and things like that. And uh, this is to do it again. They're doing it using uh, bacteria as a 3D nano printer. And if this, and it's a step towards the harnessing of full control over fabricated materials that are made using bacteria.
Can, I have nothing to say about that.
Okay.
But what experience do people have with 3D printers? Every time I see the word 3D printers, I'm
Hey,
like,
I know.
what? Okay. Let's hear.
dental,
Dental, so they can do a crown and things like that.
yeah,
3D
yeah.
printer. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Another
right.
thing they can do with a 3D printer is, the in the ear kind of hearing aid. I
Yeah.
had one made a decade ago in India, and they did this, stick this goop in your ear, and then they send out for a mold, and a week later they have it, and then you can try it on, and maybe you don't like it, and they have to make a new one, and it's another week. They can just print those out on the spot at your audiologist, and
Whoa. Okay.
so that stuff makes things very different. They also are, the advanced look here is, factories that make things, you make things out of parts.
Mm-hmm.
And with parts, you need to have the parts when you need to make them.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is you have a warehouse full of those parts, and you have guys who are handling those parts, and they watch the inventory level, and they buy more when they need them and expedite them if they're running short and all of this stuff. And imagine if you had a factory where at every step you just printed the components that you
I got it.
need for the next
Yep.
step.
Yep. Yeah.
So again, it's very different.
Richard, I was just wondering if you know this, but bacteria are living things in a way. And if you use them to make a particular material, and how do you tell the bacteria, if you will, how to stop growing?
They stop growing when you don't feed them anymore.
Oh, okay.
And they, in this place, they grow where there is some substance put down that they like to grow on.
That's still,
So again, these are clever guys doing this.
yeah, yeah. That's beyond me.
And some of the things I've heard them experimenting with is bacteria that will grow with one kind of light on them and stop growing with another kind of light on them, so you can use light to turn them on and off.
Oh, jeez.
But I was just thinking, if you could, they're not there yet to be sure, but you're thinking of making replicating organs to replace in the human body.
Right.
Mhm.
And there, the human body is full of all kinds of bacteria and other matter. And how are you going to tell these bacteria that a certain place they can, a certain place they cannot go?
Well, yeah, I think there you're going to grow the heart outside the body and put it in. They're not advanced enough to give you a new heart shot that would grow it on spot. I'm sure there's somebody working on it, though.
Probably.
Yeah.
This is part of what's exciting about this is, to me anyway, is that there are stuff they're doing that I have never imagined. And I've been imagining stuff like this since I was about 10 and started reading science fiction. They're beating the best of my imagination with real work.
Mhm.
So next,
Sometimes we learn new things, not by doing that kind of study, but through anthropology about the old stuff. Now, what's this about big game hunters of the Americas being women?
that's it's a new research that was released, and I love it when we see these things that show our ideas about stuff was just wrong. And
Oh, yeah.
this particular one, uh, the anthropologists, as they look at what seem like early human societies, that is, the hunter gatherers who are left on Earth, they see the pattern that they see around them was the sexualization of work is in all of these hunter-gatherer cultures of the world. And so they naturally think that's the way it was forever. And here, part of this is a story that's like a science story, and that is some anthropologist was studying the bone remains of a uh, skeleton from the Andes. that was about 9,000 years old. And it was a skeleton that was buried with hunting equipment and instruments to skin and prepare the what the game. And what they think, of course, is that if these kind of things were buried with a person, then that's what the person did in life. These were tools they used in life. And so that part, they've discovered a bunch of these remains, and so that was not a big deal. But then they started to analyze the skeleton, and first, some scientist who's good with human skeletons said, that's a woman. And then they confirmed it from DNA from a tooth that sure was a woman. And so that's the first part of the interesting experiment. The next part was they thought, hey, is this the only one? And we were fortunate enough to find the only woman hunter gatherer who was the
Sure.
hunter, or are there others? And they went back and looked at about 500 other set of remains in the Americas, North and South America, and located about 24 of them that they were able to sex and who had these kind of hunting equipment with them. And out of the 27 individuals, 11 were female and 15 were male. So they were almost
Mhm.
half female. And this was like 8 or 9 thousand years ago. It was in the Americas, so none of it was older than 20,000 years ago or 25,000 years ago. So it's in that kind of time period. And what they have concluded is that what they thought about the sexual division of labor was wrong, and that women were involved, and they're kind of guessing that that means there was a more equal sexual division of labor in the societies that old, and things are different with human beings with regard to what is men's work and women's work than we ever imagined. Imagine that. Wrong.
I mean, well, the story of the Amazons are go back quite a while. I mean, those are fearsome warriors. And then in the history of Egypt, but primarily before, like 2,000 or 3,000 years before Christ, they had quite a few female pharaohs there.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they were the head of the whole works. So I don't think it's not all that surprising. I've thought anyway that women are different, but not necessarily in the area of fighting and that sort of thing.
Well, we've had always the view of man the hunter, and that was one of the things that made the difference in these primitive societies. And it turns out it wasn't just man the hunter, it was humans the hunter. And that, I bet there are things that women can do in that thing that men can't do. And whatever it was, I think it was a situation where you needed all the resources you had in the tribe to be able to be successful. And all the resources means all the capable people.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
This might throw all of anthropology upside down. Maybe they have to go back and do DNA tests
That
on everything.
they have thought that. One of the things that they think about that is that, gee, we better go back and look at what we can tell about who did what work in what stages of civilization.
Mhm. Yeah.
Also,
Interesting.
looking at it through the other species, the lens of other species like lions and even tigers and leopards. The females are the better hunters. The lionesses actually do the bulk of the hunting in a pride.
That's right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh. Woohoo!
Okay, you go, girl.
Okay, we're on to our last one. What's this about eating chili pepper to make you live longer?
Mm.
Well, I thought, given the nature of the audience that we have here, I thought that this was a big story, particularly for us. And it turns out, even for people who don't live in Mexico, this is actually still a big deal, I think. The science here was done looking at thousands of studies from all of the continents about diet and health results. And they were able to identify studies that showed records of about 600,000 people. So it's a fairly big study group. And with this group, they had information on the consumption of chilies. And what they found is that as the chili eaters compared to those who rarely or never ate chilies, they found these results, that in cardiovascular mortality, there was a 26% reduction of heart problems among the chili eaters. So that's fairly significant. And that I can kind of imagine because the chili gets you revved up and stuff. The other thing they found was a 23%, almost the same reduction in cancer mortality. And I didn't have any idea that that chilies could burn up cancer. Woo. And then they found a 25% reduction in mortality of all causes. So go home and have your salsa tonight.
Well, you know what they say, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. A chili a day keeps everyone away.
That's garlic. That's garlic. A garlic a day keeps everyone away.
Oh, well, who cares?
And, anyway, I think this is health news that we can all use. And it
I didn't know you were a poem.
It makes life here in Mexico even better.
And so thanks a lot, Richard. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you all.
Richard, can you stay
Yes,
2
next
minutes?
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Stay well.
Okay.